your natural state should be to delegate. If they can do that thing 10, 20% better than I can, hand it off. For every single entrepreneur, you should be looking at hiring internationally, finding the best talent wherever they might be, right? I'm a longtime advocate for remote work.
So welcome, Connor, to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. It is a super pleasure to have you. You are an incredibly prolific entrepreneur. You founded 5 different companies, maybe innumerable other ones that have not failed, that are not really worth even talking about. One of your companies, Support Ninja, is, or at least was at some point, we would probably talk through that, but like a 9-figure valuation business. And it built some really impressive businesses and done a ton of amazing things right now today that I'm like, I want to learn from you every single moment. So it is, for my own sake, a huge pleasure to have you on. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me. And also, like, the name of the podcast is great. It's just assuming that there's excellence here that we're going to be learning from. So yeah, it should be good.
There is an assumption in the name. And I guess the next 90 minutes or so, we will find out if it's actually true for you, and we'll learn a little bit there. So on the note, actually, one of the key things I would like to ask everybody to do, what does it mean to be an excellent entrepreneur?
I had someone explain this to me before, and I'm not sure if it's a standard thing, but they're like, your job as a CEO, your job as an entrepreneur is to make sure that you set the vision, that there's money in the bank, you set the tone for the culture, and then you lead the leadership team. And I think that made it easier for me, is that if I just do those 4 things well, then that's my job, right? If not, then it's open-ended and you're like, did I do a good job or did I not do a good job? You don't really know. So I think entrepreneurial excellence is doing those 4 things really, really well.
And how do you know then when to step aside and like let other people do their stuff, right? Because so many founders are like, I'm going to be in the weeds every day, working 100+ hour weeks, end-to-end nonstop. When are the right times to step away? Like, how do you know when and what to hand off and delegate, essentially, so you can do your job as founder and everyone else can do their job as part of the team members?
You should have a extreme bias for handing off everything. So your bias, your natural state should be to delegate the things that you're doing. I think that trigger point is if they can do that thing 10, 20% better than I can, hand it off. Get out of the way, give them the things that they need. Your entire job is to set things up and then move on.
What you just said makes a ton of sense to me. I'm obviously biased towards that because I built a business in this space, right? Chore is doing some of that. Your previous business has sort of done some of that too. Founders tend to be really bad at delegating. Like, in fact, they tend to be control freaks. So how do you get good at that?
Yeah, so it's tricky. So each Support Ninja, for example, has 14 different departments at the time. And your company probably has a ton of different departments. And each department has its own skill sets that are needed, their own KPIs, their own indicators of whether that department's healthy and serving the needs of the company. And then there's a certain standard of care that you kind of need to agree on between you and your partners for each department, right? For recruitment, it's like, I want to place someone within 24 hours. That's the standard. And I want that person to, once they're placed inside that company, to be there for 6 months or for 12 months or whatever that standard is. If you're filling that role, you as a CEO are also held to that standard, and the leadership team is looking at you to keep that going. And then whenever you step back, whoever fills that role also needs to meet that standard. And then that's your indicator of if you can step back or not.
So essentially so then maybe to restate that, are you essentially setting really clear guidelines and expectations for what delight? I call it internally chore. I say, this needs to be delightful. This is what delightful looks like.
Yeah.
Setting that standard, showing what that standard is and that it's possible to hit it. And then saying, now your job is to go hit that. I know it's possible, go do it.
Yeah, exactly. And because you've done it yourself, you know what's reasonable. You know who the right person might be for that job. You know that if that person falls through, then you can step in and do that role.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. You've started all these companies. You've had some big successes. You're currently running 6 different companies today, many of which are doing some really cool things around entrepreneurs gathering together, right? A collective of entrepreneurs investing in new companies, almost a new private equity way of doing things, buying companies specifically and helping essentially run them. One of them, a company that I've been a long time customer of, in fact, and I remember hearing about the acquisition they were going through with you before I knew you. Give people a little bit more data about you, Connor. Don't be shy about showing off that you're kind of a badass.
Yeah, for sure. So I started my companies in my 20s. So I was a relatively younger guy trying to figure out how to do entrepreneurship. I had a company called Delegate It, which was like a mobile app concierge for Airbnb and HomeAway properties. We had around 550 different properties that we were managing, and we were doing it out of our college dorm room. So we were essentially trying to figure out how to fulfill requests and make sure that people have great stays and good experiences. And then from there,
So you're like the modern day version of Michael Dell doing out of his college dorm room and making computers, and you're saying you're the Airbnb version.
yeah, but terribly. I mean, like this wasn't an idea that ended up working out well. Like we ended up selling that company for parts. And so I do have to add that asterisk there, but it very naturally led to the next company, which was Embark. Like we were doing both companies at the same time. Embark, we started working on the product in November. This is a dog genetics company. So we were figuring out how do we get dog saliva samples from point A to point B, process it, give it back to the customers. And we started in November, like no product. And then by March, we had a full blown product. We were on Good Morning America. We sold out all of our test kits. It was off to the races. It was really cool to see a company kind of grow and scale.
How did you go from one deciding you even wanted to start any sort of company as a college kid, right? A lot of college kids are like, I'm going to go party and enjoy myself and maybe do some work on the side. And then starting a company in general, but Airbnb property management stuff, to saying I'm going to do dog DNA. Like how is all three of those things connected?
A lot of the things I do are not naturally connected. It's more like there's a small like niche and I'm trying to figure out how to make my way in that niche, right? And with Delegated, the main use case I was trying to figure out is how do you centralize APIs and the interface that is easy to communicate with. And then the use case for that was Airbnbs. There's a lot of needs that you have whenever you're a concierge running a experience end to end, right? And so this is the beginning of like omni-channel, right? Where you have all these requests coming in through mobile app, web app, right? Coming into a centralized hub for you to then connect to different API services to provide a service, right? And this is before a lot of the apps and tools that we use now. It made it a lot harder, a lot of lines of code that we had to write.
Are you an engineer by background or training?
So I used to write code maybe 10 years ago, but I have not written code in the past decade. So it's more like I work with other people that are much better at that.
Does AI change that? Now you can kind of vibe code stuff, a little bit.
Adam, it's amazing. Like, yeah, like we can code stuff within like 24 hours. Yeah, we made an app called Market Monster like last week, and it's been fantastic.
It's crazy. It's funny how those skills you haven't used in a long time suddenly are relevant, but not relevant because being a coder doesn't actually matter the same way it used to.
Yeah, I think it just looks different, right? You can do a lot more with a lot less. I think an idea that I like is this idea of parallel entrepreneurship where you're working on two ideas at once. It's not something that I recommend to everybody, but it tends to work for me. So while we were doing Delegate It, we had traction, but we weren't making good margin. We were making money off other service providers that were losing money. So it wasn't a good heavy margin business. But on the other hand, I had Embark, which was selling a lot of test kits and was doing really well. So for me, that was a natural transition point to wind down, Delegate It, and invest more in Embark. And eventually that company moved to Boston. I stayed in Texas. I started working on Support Ninja with two other co-founders. And that's an outsourcing company that you know of well. And at the time, outsourcing companies weren't very common. It was very hard to launch one because you had to have a lot of physical space, and it's in another country, so you're managing multiple different entities. It's a very hard start, right?
I mean, did you have to go over to like the Philippines or India or something and set up a real office? Like, how does a college kid from Texas just get on a plane and go out to the Philippines and go set up an office in Manila or whatever you did?
I mean, the way it looks is you go there every other month in the beginning, right? Like the number of times that you fly out is quite a bit, and you're finding the key people that you need to trust to run that operation. And Support Ninja ended up having people in Philippines, Ireland, Colombia. The United States had a pretty big presence here. You can outsource, in country. And we grew it to a few thousand people to a pretty decent size. And we worked with all the biggest names in tech in California. We were kind of behind the scenes in launching these big brands, and you would never know that we were there, but we had teams of people that were working on the latest launch of a lot of the wearables and a lot of the major applications that you use today.
Why did you think building a outsourcing company in 2018 was a good way to go? Like, why did that make sense? And then like walk us through in more depth. Like, what did you actually do to go get this off the ground, get customers to go trust you? Or was it because you essentially were arbitraging, you were willing to put in the groundwork to go build this network and they weren't either willing to do it, wasn't a core competency for them? What was it?
I'm going to break this off into like 3 different parts. So like outsourcing has changed. Like it's gone through different phases. It used to be that you had to like run cable, right, to get good enough internet access. And then there was too much of like a delay and it was very, very hard to do. Most of the work that you could do was phone, but you had a hard time doing internet work. There's a lot of language barriers. The next kind of wave of this is companies like TaskUs, where they're like, hey, it's easier to work on a computer in a different country. And we're also going to throw in like a really cool office space. So that way we have really low churn and work with more tech companies because a lot of tech companies don't think that that's an option. That's like the second wave. And then the third wave is people are like, you don't need office at all, right? Like you can just arrange the hiring through a wide variety of different like job posting platforms. And then you can manage the employee experience and the compliance layer through Deal or remote.com or Emerald or one of those tools, right? And then you can manage them in-house like your own team. And that's like the next third wave that we're seeing, where the barrier to entry is very, very low. And it's easier to start up. You're not flying to the Philippines, or you're not flying to the Colombia and doing boots on the ground and having 14 different departments and hundreds of staff trying to make sure that you create a very careful experience.
Given that new world, what does that mean for the future of every entrepreneur? Number one, and then for number two, for outsourcing in general. I mean, be support ninja for whatever you feel comfortable talking about. But like, does that change? You guys are part of the wave 2.0. With wave 3.0, has that dramatically changed what the business does? Or is it hard for a company that size to pivot a little bit?
Yeah. So I think for every single entrepreneur, you should be looking at hiring internationally, hiring and finding the best talent wherever they might be, right? Like find out where the best university is in Colombia and work with the best Colombian talent. And that's huge. And you're doing foreign direct investment. It's really good for that country to have access to exposure working for really cool American companies and vice versa. I'm a big fan of like international exchange and like the good things that can come from that. And so as an entrepreneur, like hire internationally, it's fantastic for you and for your company. And
but you got to know how to delegate. To go back to your earlier point, you still need to know how to hand things off.
100%. Yeah.
You can't just hire the talent.
Yeah. Use Loom, use Notion, like put together SOPs. It's never been easier to do SOPs and to have people learn about how to do a process. And so I think that is really exciting for me, is that it's easier for entrepreneurs to work abroad. That's the main thing for them. For wave 2 and wave 3, I think wave 3 is expanding the pool tremendously. So if only like say 3 to 5% of companies were outsourcing before, and that's moving to 5 to 10%, that's a significantly larger pool. The companies that are in wave 2 are going to be working with larger companies, so larger team sizes. And because they have physical office spaces, really good routines and processes and procedures, they can manage teams of 20, 50, hundreds of people in multiple different geographies for bigger projects, essentially. And then as a customer gets more experience, they're probably going to first start with like a deal on the job searching platform, do a few hires, then work with other outsourcing companies and people that have wider range of expertise like Chore, and then kind of like progress in their career. And then eventually that company could have overseas offices themselves. And that's like the very extreme side of things, right? But there's a pretty logical kind of progression and flow.
Where does this get in the future? Like project out another 5 years into the future. What does that mean for entrepreneurs when it comes to outsourcing, delegation? Maybe throw AI into there because we're going to have AI agents on top of it. What does the company of the future look like to you?
Every company is going to be hiring the best talent wherever they might be. I think there's going to be an exchange of hours and pay. So it's going to be more effective. Hourly rate is going to go up around the world. I think that's going to be really good.
Does that mean the hourly rate goes down in the US?
Potentially, but also with doing like arbitrage and our current unemployment rate in the United States, it's not really an issue at the moment. Like we have a natural rate of unemployment, and right now it's looking really, really good, even with tariffs happening and economic flux. And so I don't think that's going to be the case. I think wage rate in the United States is going to be more stifled based on taxes and things involving the middle class that we kind of need to work on.
Fair enough. Okay.
There's a pretty wide range of things that we need to do to make sure the middle class is doing okay. On the outsourcing side and where it's going, I do think that you might also see people exchanging equity with very capable, talented outsourcing professionals. People who might be located in different countries might be. It's going to be more flexible, more agile. You'll be able to flex people in and out to kind of fit the needs of your business.
I would agree with that too. I'm going to ask something that's a little bit controversial, probably not between us, but maybe with other people. What's then your take on remote versus hybrid versus in office?
I love elements of all of it. I like being in an office with people. I like seeing them face to face, but I've also ran and I currently run a lot of remote companies. And so my take is I'm usually very intentional with the remote staff about making sure that we fly them in, that we do retreats together, and that you do remote-based activities with them. It takes a lot of work to run a remote and a in-person company, and I think it takes more work to do a good remote culture than people think. So I think my personal stance is that as I'm getting older, I want to be more involved in my community, and I might be doing more local based businesses, but I'm a longtime advocate for remote work.
Yeah, you and me both. I think given the trends of global talent and the cost differential, being good at having a remote team is a skill set. But if you get good at that skill set, you have a distinct advantage over your competitors who need to be in-house, who by almost by definition, they are reducing their upside on great talent by having just people in one location and likely increasing your costs, right? You don't have an office, a bunch of other things that come from remote, but there are downsides, less community, less maybe, building blocks across the whole team, maybe slightly higher turnover. There's also higher replaceability factor. In other words, yes, higher turnover, but you also have more people who are available for that job opening that might open up who might be even better at that role.
True. Yeah, 100%. I think it's some other questions are how can you get better at vetting? How can you get better at onboarding and then nurturing that person for a longer period of time? We changed our office spaces at Support Ninja to be more like remote hubs, so like co-working spaces. So people can come bring their laptops, and we would have these little hubs near people who were working remotely, and they would come in for team building activities and stuff like that. So there's a lot of clever, fun stuff you can do with remote employees.
You're building Support Ninja, you and your buddy, and you get up to a few thousand people. I mean, what does that journey look like? Walk us through that journey of building this big company, and you did it. I mean, you kind of are still doing it. I guess you're still involved with them, but 10 years on or so, what did that look like? What was growth like? How fast was it? How hard was it? What are some of the war stories from there or lessons learned?
Yeah, we joke at Support Ninja that we've seen it all, right? We had a volcano eruption, we had typhoons, we had earthquakes, we had pandemic that hit us. We've literally seen it all, and we've gotten the calls at 2 a.m. being an earthquake hit. We have pictures of ceiling tiles falling down and trying to figure out how to get people home, and it's an incredible opportunity to learn how to operate a business and deal with a large number of people. And it's very different at 10, 50, 100,000 people. So at 10 people, it feels like you're all part of the same company and you know everyone really, really well. And that continues to last up to around 100 people, but it gets harder to keep track of everything as an individual or as a CEO. That's when you start to build out that leadership team. You start there's a big difference when you are, I remember being on an airplane, and we were at I think 500 people, and I had flashcards, and I was trying to remember like everyone. And as I would go around the office, I would take notes on like their hobbies or their interests or the things that they've said in passing. And it's, you lose some of that intimate feel, and you just try to hold on to that for as long as you can.
What are key milestones that you saw, and how did you decide, like, when do you bring on that next executive? And like, if you had to give advice to someone growing a business, is it like when you hit 50 people, bring on a head of HR, or like what are heuristics you either recommend people do, or you actually did at Support Ninja to help grow the business properly?
Yeah. So at 40 people, you need a HR person. Usually at 40, you start to feel it. At almost right away, you need to have someone that's trained in IT and InfoSec and security, because that could take out your company if you're not, depending on the contract. So the first time you have let's call it like a $200,000, $300,000 per year contract, that's when you need to look at like cyber liability insurance and making sure that the data is stored the right way. Senior executive hires are really, really hard. In a lot of small companies, they go and they find ex senior executive that worked at big company in their space. And that is a notorious trap for a lot of people. And sometimes it might work out, but a lot of times you're getting someone that used to be in charge of 100 people and never did the work that you're asking them to do on a day-to-day basis. And I would also say like, really focus on the people that helped to get you there and elevating them as much as humanly possible. And also pay attention to the people that you like spending time with, because if you're going to be on this journey for like 3, 5, 10 years, right? Like the people that you do business now might be the people that you do business in the future with. And if you like building with them, it's more collaborative. If they have a growth mindset, they can grow and develop as a company goes along. As far as filling out that leadership team, you're going to have a balance of some people that you grow and develop along the way. You're going to have some balance of people that are some population of leaders that are maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, but just be careful about the people that are like 3 or 4 steps ahead that haven't done that work in the past year.
Were there sort of milestones? Like, are there things that you would have done differently, or you would want to replicate for the different companies you're running today? Or was it certain right time, right place, right team? Like, what was the elixir that an entrepreneur could try to recreate to have the level of outcome and success that you did with Support Ninja?
Every founder that I've talked to that have sold a business, and we have a group called Post-Exit Founders, right? So it's a pretty wide group. If you ask them, if you were to do that company that you just sold today, like how would that go? If you did exactly the same thing, they would all say it wouldn't work. Like it's very much, for a lot of them at least, like it's very market oriented. Like there's a wave. You were implementing the tactics that worked then. Like if you were to take my playbook and try to implement it today, it would look very, very different. And it's the wave that we were riding is we were introducing outsourcing to companies. Like we were the gateway, right? We are the easiest way to outsource for a tech startup, right? And right now, that wave is different. There's a lot of people that already know about outsourcing. So then it's like, how do you improve the other aspects of the business?
Okay. So walking through then like your current business today, give people an overview of all the different businesses, the 6 businesses you're running. What do they do, and how are they, they all, a lot of them at least seem like, to me when I was reviewing them, they all interact with the other to some extent. They're sort of, they flow with each other. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. How do you think through them, and walk me through all the ones you built and you're running, and then how they fit together or don't?
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing I did was I started an EOS franchise. So the Entrepreneurial Operating System, it's this orange book that you may or may not see behind me if you're on YouTube. And it's talks about like simple frameworks that you can implement in your business to help you grow and lead your leadership team. And I used it as Support Ninja, and seeing that used across thousands of people was really, really cool, right? I could hand them a book saying like, hey, we operate on this system. You should read this. And it got everyone in alignment. We would do meetings in each country, quarterly plannings the same way, team meetings the same way. And that was fantastic. And so it worked well for us at Support Ninja. We tailored it to fit our needs. And so in my head, I was like, I'm interested in learning about buying companies and not necessarily starting it, but having a framework where I'm like a mini private equity firm. Like I'm like a mini hub, and I find other founders that might not want to sell to a private equity firm, but might be open to selling to another entrepreneur. And then what am I offering to that company? And my answer was, well, I've done these different things, but I also am an EOS implementer and I can help implement this inside your company. And then also use EOS as a way to find other companies, because there's 100,000 plus companies that run on EOS today. If I know that they're running on a model, it removes one of the unknowns that you have when you're buying a business, which is how do they operate? Yeah, right. So the first thing I did was start an EOS franchise.
Quick question there. Does that imply that, like, if I were buying a company and they didn't run on EOS, like they were a good company, obviously I was interested in acquiring them, and I was like, I can come in and implement EOS, and I know that's going to give a 10%, 20% boost, like right off the bat. Isn't that almost an upside if they haven't done EOS, because it's sort of a low hanging fruit maybe for you to implement? Or
yes and no. I mean, like there's going to be some operational gains, right? And in some cases, they might have some homegrown systems that are great, right? And so every single deal is going to look different, and implementing EOS might give you that 10%, and that might be enough for your thesis, right? Like I come in, I buy a business, I implement EOS. We find areas of optimization. The leadership team is running better. We generate 20% more revenue, and then we kind of move on from there. That could be a model and enough for a lot of people. I think I was looking at EOS more from my sanity standpoint, right? Like I want to know how the teams are meeting each week. I wanted to do the quarterly team meetings with everyone all together. It's a system not just for those companies to run, but also for me to interact with those companies, which a lot of holding companies don't have.
why don't companies have something like EOS, either EOS itself or something like it? I mean, to be clear, by the way, I will say we've looked at doing EOS at Shore. We have not implemented it. We have sort of built our own semi-similar version, not perfectly implemented. The person who's running it is wonderful, but we probably haven't been as good about implementing it as we should. But I've also been not totally convinced that it's really worth it right now to do it. So tell me why I'm totally wrong, and we absolutely should be using EOS.
Outside of EOS is you need to have an operating system. So like you can home grow it, you can do, there's some other systems that you can look at, but you should have an operating system for your business. And like RACI for accountability, some people have an accountability chart, right? Like what's huge is that you don't have to make it all up on your own. There's people who have built these systems. And once you have something, you stand by it, like you stick with it. This is how we operate and this is how we run. I think that's huge. As to why other private equity firms and holding companies don't do this, and a lot of them do, is so like private equity firms, they come from a banking standpoint. So they're looking at companies in a different way about how do you optimize expenses. Sure, they might recommend that they do EOS at some point, but it's not key to their model. And a lot of the companies are have different teams that are working on them. And so you might have a different vice president on each of the different companies and different a managing partner, different associate, right? So there are like a bunch of, in some ways, islands working in a fund, working within a private equity firm. Mm-hmm. And from my standpoint, I was like, I don't necessarily want islands. I want them to be connected in some way. I want them to interact with each other. I want them to share things that are working and things that weren't working, and also be communicating and operating this in a similar way. And so I would go to a company saying like, hey, and to your prior question about the different companies and what do they do, if I buy a company, I usually tell the founder like, hey, I'm interested in you rolling over a portion of your equity stake. So I want them to have like some buy-in on the overall next version of the entity. You can co-invest alongside me on future deals. So that way you're growing your scope as an entrepreneur. Yep. We have a system called EOS. This is what it is. If you're interested in this, let me know. You're going to be working with other companies that will help you with hiring or with marketing or with development, right? And whenever I was looking at buying companies, I was looking at buying companies that would help reduce the biggest costs inside the P&L. So I was looking at hiring. Marketing is normally a huge expense. Development is usually a big expense. So like, how can I have these in-house? They serve outside customers, but they also service the other companies that are inside the portfolio. And that's worked out really well.
So then with these companies, when you buy them, you are always implementing EOS if they don't already have it. And at what size is EOS the right thing to bring on board? Like what size company or revenue number?
I would say between 10 to 50 is usually a sweet spot for EOS. When we had thousands, what we did was we would implement it at different levels of the organization. So the different departments would also have their own level 10 meetings, their own quarterly planning. But what was nice is we would say, here's the goals of the organization. In EOS, we call them rocks. And then each department will build their rocks based on the company's overarching goals.
Mm-hmm.
Each team below them also has a level 10 meeting, a leadership team meeting structure. And they also have rocks that flow into the department rocks, that flow into the company rocks.
Yep.
Right. And it's huge because you're giving a larger team autonomy and the resources that they need to be able to lead themselves. And you're ultimately not there. You're not there every day.
You're essentially just saying, hit the goals. These are the big goals. Figure out how to go hit them. I don't really care how you go do it as long as it's within X budget and X upside. And if you disagree or think you can't hit it, let's have a conversation beforehand. But at the start of the quarter, not at the end, about how you didn't get enough resources. Like I don't want to hear that at the end of the quarter when you missed the target.
Yeah, and it's huge for me as a CEO. After the end of the quarter, we would review the different rocks and the different KPIs and measures, and you could see, did they flow through or did they not? Right? It was a very clear indicator of like how aligned is that department. And as you grow and scale, that's huge. Your job as CEO. So that those 4 things I mentioned prior, like you get another one, which is just alignment. Like you're just repeating yourself again and again to make sure that you are consistent and that you bring everyone along with you. And that's very hard to do.
How does a founder decide like to spend the money? So one of the things that I struggle with even myself, like I try to be, I think I'm a very frugal founder, but also willing to spend money in the right places. It's really about delegating as much as possible. Hiring someone like you as my EOS implementer, like it's expensive. It is not a low cost thing. It's not expensive, not only cash wise, but time wise.
Oh yeah, for sure.
How do I think through the ROI?
I would say depending on the implementer and the level of experience, they have different rates. So whenever you're talking to an EOS implementer and you're like, hey, that's too much, talk to someone who just came out of training, who might be more, might have a different rate, that might be open to working with you. And it's going to range everywhere between, like from a budgeting standpoint, 25 to 50,000 is like the rough ballpark for like what you should budget
per year or total, like all in over. Because isn't it sort of a 2-year implementation cycle or?
Yeah, for the year. And so companies graduate, right? So you use an implementer for a little bit, and then after that, you can self-implement. A lot of people continue to keep their facilitator because it can be sometimes really hard in the room, managing different personalities, or the CEO just wants to be the CEO seat, not just have, not have the facilitator and the CEO seat, right? And so companies do it different ways. The way I see it is that there's cost with not doing it, and that's pretty substantial. Sometimes whenever you're implementing inside companies, they could, sometimes you're helping save that leadership team. Sometimes you're helping them progress. And I view it almost as like a hire. Like, would I be willing to hire someone to help my leadership team run more effectively? A junior level marketing hire right now is ranging between $45,000 to $75,000, right out of college, right?
Yep.
And if I'm just trying to get 10% out of the most effective people in my company, what would I do? What would I be willing to pay to do that?
Yeah.
And so that's usually how I think about it.
Yeah, that's I think very much the right way to think about it. It's shocking once again. Like this is sort of a pitch. I'm sure you guys made it Support Ninja, but we should really do a chore where it's, hey, look, we're going to give you 10 to 40 new hours a month as a founder and CEO. What's the ROI on that? I'm still shocked by how many founders say, well, like, I still think I can go do it myself. And I'm like, you can do it yourself, but like, should you do it yourself? And what is the alternative? What if you had that extra time and you could invest that in growth or in product? And it's still shocking. Founders don't always get it. They just don't, for reasons that are beyond me at this point.
So the thing that keeps me up at night, I'm sure it keeps other founders up at night, is every time you're working on something, you're questioning whether that's the right thing to be working on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And That's like anxiety provoking, right? Like you could be doing something that's effective, but are you doing the thing that's 10x effective?
Yep.
Right. And that question is going to be running on the back of your head constantly. Do I need to be in this meeting? Do I need to be
You're not able to justify anything, right? Founders can justify that they should be there for always. So we're great at creating justifications for ourselves because we're also have this power now as a founder.
For sure. Yeah. But I think that with EOS and like, this was the answer for me, right? Everyone's going to have a different answer for whatever framework works for them. But for EOS, for me, taking that one day cuts down on other meetings that I would otherwise be having, right? And then it's honing in, not just me, but the other members of the leadership team, that this is how we should be prioritizing our time. And then it quiets some of the other distractions that you could be having as a CEO or as a founder. Your goal is to take out those rocks. And those at the end of the quarter, those rocks are either going to be done or not done, right? Mm-hmm. And so like whenever I was talking about operator equity, the first thing I did was EOS because I was trying to find other companies that ran on this framework. I was looking to add value to the companies that I was acquiring and ultimately make them more valuable in the future. And then after that, I was looking for other companies that would help the portfolio as a whole.
Yep. Smart. Okay. So walk us through the rest of your job. So operator equity. So you're acquiring companies. Why did you decide to go start something to acquire companies? Why did that make sense for you? Why does private equity or company, I don't know if Invisible is sort of an example company you think about, but like why do these companies out there not do it well, or maybe there aren't enough of them and you're like, I'm gonna go build something even better in this space?
So I would say private equity firms do it very well. Like they are so fantastic at doing what they do that they're eating the market. Like it used to be that you would go sell your company, and at the table you would have 7 strategics and 3 financial buyers. And right now it's the other way around. You have 7 financial buyers and 3 strategics that you're talking to. Financial buyers are the main buyers in the market now. They're buying up dentist office. They're industry agnostic. They're able to raise a wide amount of cash flow. Their cycles are relatively quick. You know that they have the cash. Like they are extremely successful. So in this case, I'm looking at a model that is successful and doing really, really well. But on the other hand, there's expectations that private equity firms have to their LPs or their limited partners. They have an expectation that they're going to sell this company and that's going to go to that fund and be distributed. And that's going to happen within a certain time frame. And that's very, very key, is that sometimes that doesn't work out. Sometimes you need to hold a company for a longer period of time. And sometimes people don't want to sell to a private equity firm. They would much rather sell to a strategic, or they would much rather sell to another entrepreneur and grow that with someone else. Like it's just providing that alternative, I think, is very, very impactful. I would encourage a lot of entrepreneurs after they sell their business to consider buying other businesses.
What are the size businesses that operator equity purchases? Like what is the right size range for people who are listening? Like, hey, like maybe I want to be a partner with Connor. What's the price point?
So I would recommend, so initially I was looking at 1 to 3 million in EBITDA. Yep. So earnings. A lot of people are playing in that space. And also a lot of companies are pretty small. And if you have 1 to 3 million in EBITDA, you have a proven model, but you don't have normally a fully built leadership team. And so I've changed that to be, I'm looking for companies that have north of 3 million in EBITDA, that are a little bit bigger. And I think that's a pretty good space to be. It's also different because in the beginning I was using my own cash, right? And as you go up, it makes sense to work with other partners that might be in that space and say like, hey, do you want to buy this business together? And that way you're bringing in more expertise. You're also, your financial liability is less. So that's something to think about.
I assume there's also sort of a cost of capital, right? As you start getting to some of these bigger players, they can have better outcomes because their cost of capital to essentially purchase these businesses is lower. Or maybe that doesn't matter.
Are you talking about private equity firms?
Yeah, private equity, but I mean, you're playing against them, right? And you're still looking for outcomes for your LPs and or yourself. And I mean, like you also have to make a decision if it's your own cash. Should I buy this company or put it in? I can be an LP in a private equity firm, or I can put it in the stock market. And what's my sort of cost of capital with all the alternatives that exist?
Yeah, I think it's very different standpoints. I mean, if you are a private equity firm, your LPs are pension funds and these massive family offices. Like it's a very different pool that you're raising from, and it's a very effective. Like the return rate is 8 to 15%. Like it's really good. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're considering doing the holding company model, like what I'm talking about, you're holding for a longer period of time, and you're investing in yourself. There's very different thing for me, like investing. If I'm buying a business, I view that as like I'm making an investment in my own business decision making and my own workflows and my own process, versus investing in a index fund. And the returns from that are outsized. I mean, companies can have exaggerated near infinite returns. And so if you're in a good market, you're in a good wave. It's a lot more work. But the question is, how do you want to be spending your day? And this is how I want to spend mine.
I mean, you're essentially saying, to put words in your mouth, so tell me if it's accurate. You're essentially saying you want to bet on yourself. Like you think a better investment is yourself versus anyone else.
Yeah. If you were to look at my portfolio, if I'm not investing in myself and I'm not buying these companies, I want it to be in like a REIT or an index fund.
Yep.
Like I want to be really safe. I want my 8%, perfectly happy. I'm not, I've done plenty of angel investing. It's not necessarily my thing. I much rather prefer buying a business I believe in, working more closely with that entrepreneur. That, in my opinion, is a better investing strategy.
When you think through buying these companies and you're like, hey, I'm expecting, okay, 3 million EBITDA company. I assume you're expecting you're going to double, triple, quadruple the size of the company for revenue or something over the next X period of time. What are the things like, what could entrepreneurs, listeners of this podcast, take away from that? Like, hey, like these are things that Connor's doing. He's been a successful entrepreneur. How should I try to emulate that to an extent? You know, without giving away your secret sauce or something, but like, how can I try to emulate that?
Well, there's no secret sauce. And here's the thing is that like each one of those departments, those 14 different departments, there's like tips, tricks, and hacks, right? Where you just get 1% better in each of those. And then you just kind of inchworm your way to a healthier, more profitable company. And so I could kind of work my way through each of the different departments and say, here's things that I would do. For finance, I would recommend that you do a monthly finance review and that you try to close your books out within a week. And that you separate your line items between growing the business and running the business, and analyzing those growing the business items very, very closely. If you're talking about recruiting, I would make sure that you're syndicated across a wide variety of different recruiting sources, and that you're having a really tight response time for people, and that you're doing automated testing, and that you have standards that you put in place for personality and for hard skills, and then for team fit, right? Like, so it's like each of those things. One, you're aiming for 1%, but you might get 10%, you might get 15. And if you do that for a long enough time, you usually have a pretty good outcome.
I think there are so many companies, you've done much more research here than I have, but my impression is that a large majority of companies don't have essentially basic hygiene in place from day one. And I kind of get why maybe, but like I would love for you to talk about this if this sounds accurate. And they never really get it in place. So you can come in and say, hey, like, here's these small little changes we're going to do to just run you as a professional business. And that is going to enable you to start to take off. And like, you've obviously got the germ of something that's really successful, or else you wouldn't even be in this conversation. But here's all these small things, almost like a consultant, I can come in and put in place, and that will help take things off. Is that accurate? And why aren't more companies like that off the bat?
Why aren't there more companies that are doing it, or why aren't there companies that are helping other people do it?
More the former. I'd say the company's helping people do it. That's sort of what Chore is theoretically trying to do. More.
Right.
Like, hire us. We're going to make you more of a professional company right off the bat because we're going to put all these things in place for you. Yeah. But like, why don't? To me, these things, the reason it's easier for me to do it at Chore is because like to me this is second nature. Like these are just things you need to have in place. Like, yes, you need a good bookkeeper. You don't even need to spend very much to get a good bookkeeper. You need those things in place to run a professional business and essentially get all the other junk out of the way so you can be great at what you do as a founder, which presumably is around some sort of product differentiator or sales ability.
I think that a lot of people don't know what good looks like. Take a doctor's practice. A doctor's practice could be bringing in $12 million a year and have pretty healthy margins, but they're trained as doctors, right? They struggle with their website. They struggle with local SEO. They struggle with closing their AR. The doctors that are leading the practice don't get financial reports on time, right? A lot of the hygiene things are because they don't know what that standard looks like. For repeat founders that have done it before, they have a higher chance of success for exactly the reasons that you're talking about. There's not like a business handbook, right, that says like, here's the way that you can do things. EOS is an example of a handbook, but it doesn't cover everything.
Why don't more founders get someone in place who can help them? Is it just once again, they just don't know, or they're just kind of like, I'm going to go start my own private doctor practice and get some customers and hope for the best?
Yeah. So like, let's say that I don't know, I don't like my financial reporting, but I don't know why, right? I know that like, I feel like I don't have the information that I need to run my business. I see that my bank account balance is going down low. And I'm like, okay, so what should I do? A logical next step is to look at transactions in QuickBooks, right? And kind of go through. And then you're like, oh, this is overwhelming to me. I'm going to type in like analytics software for QuickBooks, and I might find some to plug in. And I'm like, oh, I need to categorize it. I might not even know the name of the title of the person. A lot of business owners don't know the difference between a controller and a bookkeeper or an accountant, right? So like, if you think about it from that standpoint, people don't know what to Google or what to ChatGPT to kind of fill that gap. Hopefully it gets better. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe the switch from Google to ChatGPT, GPT is like, hey, you need to use a bookkeeper, silly. Like, come on.
So speaking of like being a great entrepreneur, are there elements that you're describing? Like, you can be a great entrepreneur, maybe not know any of those things, right? You have this person who has no idea. So how would you define that again? Like, what are going back to the skill sets? What does it really mean to be an excellent entrepreneur?
I still think that those 4 things stand that you need to do, and those are your responsibilities. I think that there's some personality traits that help.
Okay.
Strong beliefs, loosely held, like the ability to believe in something, be firm on it, but also be open to challenging points of view that might push back and change your stance. If you think that, if you convince yourself that everything's fine and nothing can be improved, and you're not going to be looking for the people that might make your business 5 or 10% better, or the software or the service that might help it get there. And then like analyzing opportunity costs, understanding where to best allocate your time, being consistent for your team, being intentional with your leadership team. I was learning from my leadership team as I brought them on. I mean, I was 20 something years old, early mid 20s, working with people that had 30 years of work experience. And so in many respects, I was hiring the CFO that was going to be not just helping like execute on the plan that we have, but will be a partner to me, and we're learning through this together. So being able to leverage and nurture that leadership team is huge.
So speaking of that a little bit, building that team, essentially hiring, let's talk about that. How do you hire well? What are key strategies you use to do it well? What does even good hiring look like? And walk us through maybe some of the failures that you've had, without obviously naming any names or something, but like walk us through you've gotten it wrong.
I think that like you're looking for a certain hard skills that need to be tied to that job. And usually it's like either they've done it or they haven't. And like a lot of people have this thing where they're like, well, they haven't done it, but they have the potential to learn, and I'll train them in how to do it. And that increases your chance of failure pretty tremendously. You are more likely, and this sounds incredibly obvious, but you're more likely to have success with someone that's done it before. And so check those boxes as far as those hard skills. And I usually give them homework. So I'm like in line with their position. And so if they're a leader, I might ask them for like a 3, 6, 9 month plan outlining how they're going to revamp our AR and our financial services department. And then they come together. I get to see how they think, how they present information. And that's really helpful.
Are there some risks though when you're saying like hire someone who has sort of experience? There's also lots of examples of people who you hire for experience and they totally flame out because you're like, I got someone who was VP of X at Google and I'm so proud of it. And you tell your whole board and investors and they completely flame out.
Yeah, this is actually an EOS thing where it's like your accountability chart is what you actually do, not what your title says, right? And so with that VP, and let's say that you're looking for a controller level person that can close the books for you within a week, right? That VP level person probably managed like 4 different controllers and an army of bookkeepers to do that job. I'm asking them to, like, when is the last time they actually closed the books like themselves? Like, when was the last time that they actually went through and categorized the expenses? And what did that report look like? How did you report up to the executive? And so it's still the same thing. It's like, have they done that thing in the past year? That VP may have overseen it, might have been accountable for it, but they weren't responsible for actually making sure that was done. So yeah, that's like on the skill side. And then on the personality assessment side, I think it's worth spending time like face to face with that person. If that means you jump on a plane and it's a high level hire, then that's what you have to do.
Oh man, that's a good. We're actually hiring a head of customer success at Shore. In generally, because I believe in just hiring great people anywhere in the world. It almost certainly the person will be outside the U.S. I'm like, should I jump on a plane to go meet our top candidates? We're not there yet, but I probably should. At the same time, I don't know. Okay, that's a good point. But okay, so kind of getting that fit.
Yeah, let's talk about how it goes wrong, right? Because I've done the hires where I hired like a senior chief revenue officer and they haven't done it. They haven't actually sold something in like a long time. Or you hire someone that seems really nice to you as a CEO and seems like they align with your values. They say things behind other people's backs that might not be in a position above them. Other things that don't work out is if they're very good with like the ideal of something, but they struggle with like the tactics or the execution or meeting people where they're at or being open-minded to the systems that were already there and they're planning on blank slating everything, right? Like you kind of want someone that comes in, understands what's currently working, what's currently not working before making a move. It's kind of like the measure twice, cut once kind of thing. So there's a lot of small things that you kind of need to watch out for.
How quickly do you know if someone's crushing it or they're not a fit?
I wish I was better at this. And like there's times, every time you fire someone, every time you let someone go, one, it hurts. But two, it's like you always wish you let that person go sooner. Yeah. And so like there's been some times when I caught it early and like within 2 to 3 weeks, like we part ways. And then there's some times when it took like a year and a half, because it takes such a long time for ideas to come to fruition and for some things to kind of come out of the woodworks. And it's pretty impactful. The cost of a bad hire, especially as you get bigger, could set you back by 6 months to a year and a half.
So what do you do then to make sure you're continuously improving, right? No one, even the best hirers, employers in the world are perfect at this, but how do you make sure you're getting better every day? Like what are you doing a retro after each failure? Are you doing exit interviews with each person who leaves? How are you learning and then putting that data into an improved process?
Yeah. So like postmortems, when things don't go right, that's pretty standard. If you are good at mapping out your processes, so we had a project management team, we would map out all of our key processes and it made it very easy to kind of feel and find where the problem was and then make that change. People who don't have that process outlined, they don't have a map. They don't understand where they got lost, right? And that's usually more of a mature company thing. There's quite a few things that you can do to make sure that you're on track. That's kind of the argument for EOS or for having an operating system in the first place, is that you need to have those warning indicators. If you miss your rock, if you have a task that's 2 weeks past due, like these are all indicators that need to be tracked and rolled up and addressed.
Does that become it's sort of quasi EOS, but does that become like almost a dashboard, a database for you as a founder to be tracking in knowing like the status of everything?
Yeah. And I think that's where it's really cool, right? Like you can use 90.io or you can use Notion, and we have all of these like connected databases. I can see every single level 10 meeting that has ever happened. I can see all the issues that have been tracked, all the notes that are tied to those issues. I can see all the tasks that are past due. all the rocks across the company, which ones are on track, which ones are off track.
How do you then train everyone else in the team to continue that hiring process and make sure they're keeping up with your mentality around hiring? And then, by the way, also, how long did you interview every hire, and when did you stop doing that? And what's your advice for companies?
I think I stopped interviewing every hire around 100. And then as far as the other things about whether, like, how do you trust other people to interview and to hire? That goes to frameworks. Like, you kind of fall to the level of your systems, right? The best frameworks that you have, the more standards that you have, the better. The challenge here is that you have structure, but you also need to bake in flexibility, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can show someone, like, here's how you do this as a part of your onboarding, but then you also need to leave a little room for art, a little room for people to make it their own. And so that's a little weird dichotomy that you have to manage when you're working with a large volume of people, is that you have a hiring SOP where you have to kind of check boxes and jump through hoops, but you also have to sometimes have like a release valve built into your frameworks and your processes where they can create art, essentially. That sounds cheesy, but like, give them a little bit more freedom.
Yep. Do you think, related to hiring, but not directly, which is a lot of founders struggle with the idea of either finding a good co-founder or bringing on a good co-founder, or even having one? What is your advice there?
Yeah, Y Combinator was famous for saying like 2 is the way to go. And I'm not a hard stance on that. I think it's amazing if you find a partner that can take some of the load. I think it's one of the most important relationships you could ever have. If you're not in a place to have that relationship with someone, then don't do it. If I can't do all things and I want someone to be strong where I'm weak, and someone's usually more visionary, someone's more of like an operator or integrator, someone's usually more oriented towards sales and marketing, someone's more oriented towards development or operations. Like, it helps to have other people, but I don't like making a hard rule.
Fair enough. I think that's probably right. I do sometimes wonder if, like, the earlier you are in your sort of entrepreneurial journey, the more likely it is you should have someone to help be there with you. Whereas maybe the later you get, or the more experience you have, the less likely you are to need that. What are also your thoughts, and jumping around a little bit for a second, but what are your thoughts around fundraising versus not fundraising? You bootstrap Support Ninja, I believe. It's like, but obviously you're now putting money into other companies and have done some investing yourself. What is the right trajectory, right way to go for a founder?
Yeah, I am. The mentality I had with Support Ninja is, if I ever want to go raise money, I want them coming to me. I don't want to be going out to them. Right. And so that was the mentality that we had all the way to, and we were open to fundraising at different points, but we never needed it. We were making money from our customers. We had a good cash flow model. Like, that's the ideal, is your customers are your is your fundraising partner. I think a very common mistake, and so Embark raised money, Delegate it before, is that a lot of founders think fundraising is a way to go. It's a flashier thing. You see it on Shark Tank, and it's a little bit of a trap. So last episode of my podcast, we had Nick Huber and Alex Lieberman, and we were talking about sweaty startups, right? And I love sweaty startups. I wish more people would do things that they know that work and try to find an angle or a 10% improvement on that thing and just execute really, really well.
What's the definition of a sweaty startup?
Yeah. So for Nick, he talks about things that might be like storage units, and I think that's huge. And also, from a software standpoint, you don't need to raise as much money as you used to. Like, we were talking about vibe coding. Like, you can code an app in 24 hours, right? Yeah. You might need to polish it up and get it across the finish line. But you don't need to hire that team of 12, 20 different developers. And a lot of that money goes towards marketing expense. So the question is how can you get clever, creative, and do more with less? Have you heard of seed strapping?
No, that's a new term for me.
Yeah, it's new for me too. So the idea is that a lot of companies are just raising the seed because, like, vibe coding came out and it's easier to build these apps. So they raise that $2 million and that's it.
Yep. I'm not shocked to hear that. I do think we're heading towards a world where most companies will be a very, very small core team, and the rest will be sort of outsourced contractors for either specific work or just for ongoing things. Once again, like for Chora, I like to imagine we live in a world where you always need someone to do your back office operations, you don't need a full-time person. Like hiring a full-time internal person, you have to manage, train, deal with all the human things that go into it. Oh my God, like we have lots of people on our team. Like that's really challenging. I would not want to do that for roles that I don't understand or that are not core to my business.
Oh yeah,
I think that we're moving in that world.
Yeah, it's going to be more flexible. In regards to fundraising, I think there's going to be a lot more fundraising needs around hardware. You'll probably see enterprise values for hardware companies like Figure shoot through the roof. They have more of a moat. You'll see more software paired with services that are more expensive, and the software is something you give away for free.
Agreed with all that. Do you take any lessons, or just keep jumping around a little bit? Do you take any lessons from other entrepreneurs? Do you read about other entrepreneurs? Who do you learn from when you're thinking through? Do you have mentors? When you think through your businesses, do you have mentors, advisors? Are you an avid reader of bios? Like, where do you get your other information and your ideas?
I love it face-to-face, talking to other founders, and I've done this a lot more since I sold my business. So we have Post-Exit Founder Group. I have the Entrepreneur Cooperative, which is a co-op for founders. I'm meeting with people constantly, like over drinks. We have a hike/ruck that's happening this weekend, where we have 50 people that are walking 3 and 5 miles. I think that's amazing. If you're not part of a peer group, it saved my company several times, like just finding out the right piece of information at the right time. I think that's huge. And then as far as reading, I love reading more autobiographies from different people. Like I love Shoe Dog or The Fish That Ate the Whale. I like these like weird kind of quirky stories. It humanizes some of these people. You see them progress as their company grows. Some of the frameworks, and there's not a lot of books that have good frameworks. Sometimes they just express like the key idea within the first 3 chapters, and then after that they repeat it in different ways. So I tend to lean more towards like stories of entrepreneurs and what they went through.
Are there any patterns and trends though that you think you've seen across different founders and CEOs, either one thing you know of or read about, that lead to their success? You know, a certain mindset or personality trait?
Yeah, I mean, you can be the smartest guy in the room. I think the market conditions that are huge. Like, have you ever heard about the wave, the surfboard, and the surfer?
I haven't, but I use an analogy like that all the time. So maybe I haven't thought of it that way, because I talk all the time with my team. I'm like, you can't surf a wave, an ocean that is like the tide's going out. You need there to be a wave. Like otherwise you can't even surf.
Every
you
single
can be a good surfer, but like that takes reps and practice.
For sure. And like, so the wave is like the market, right? The market that you're in, and how big is that wave? How big is that market? You can just be floating on your back and that wave will carry you to shore, right? Like you don't have to be great. And then the surfboard, you need the right service, you need the right product. And then the surfer, that's you, that's the CEO, that's your team, right? And so like, I do think about every single person that you read about had a surfboard and a wave. But I think the surfer, like timing the wave, if you guys have ever surfed, like knowing how to identify it and then make the right moves, that's huge, right?
Yep. And so is that then a level of experience you think for a lot of these successful entrepreneurs is they are able to surf, or use even yourself as an example, because I also want to spend still time talking about how you manage 6 different companies, but like is it because you built that muscle essentially of identifying the wave and knowing then how to surf it that enables you to do what you do?
Yeah, some of it's analytics and some of it's luck, right? Like Support Ninja, the wave is outsourcing, making it easier to hire abroad. Embark, the wave is dog ownership. Like that's shooting through the roof, the access to be able to process genetic information on a chip. With operator equity, it's the ability to buy companies and act like my own mini private equity firm. That means I have to have software. That means I have to have resources. That means I have to have experience. But also a lot of people who are retiring, and there's a lot of businesses that are for sale. And then the counter trend to the current private equity model. So that's like the wave that I'm riding in. And so some of it's luck, some of it's analytics, but it's also good to know your wave.
And you think like that is how does like an entrepreneur who's just getting started, how do they identify that themselves? Is it because they have a lot of experience and knowledge in a space?
That's ideal. You don't have to have it, but it's great. a lot of things that you see like on trend reports, like if you look at Google search analytics, if you look at just having a curiosity as you kind of go about your day, like everywhere you look, there's a multimillionaire that put that thing there, right? There's someone that made millions on fences and cutting the wood and getting the wood to you, and like there's so many different parts of that supply chain. And so if you just have that curiosity, that really helps. I think a lot
high
of
level of
people,
curiosity in general.
yeah, I think that's huge. And a lot of people go where they say they go where people aren't, right? Like a lot of people are really excited about like this idea that no one's doing, but more likely than not, people aren't doing it for a reason, and you just don't know what that reason is.
Yep.
Like 9 times out of 10, like 1 times out of 10, like you might be like great and like you found that one spot, but normally there's a reason why people aren't doing that business idea. And so it's okay to find a company that's doing it successfully and follow in their footsteps.
Yep. No, great point. Like, don't be shy of that, and then maybe just execute better. Do you have any theses around building a good culture or in like what is an ideal culture?
Wow, yeah, that's a big one, and that one changes as the company grows. So, yeah, I can tell you about what we did at Support Ninja and like what went really well and what didn't. We actually had a team for internal communications. So we had like our own internal newsletter that we would send out to people, letting them know what was happening. We had our own little company intranet where like everything was connected. You could, on your first day, drop to the homepage of this like Notion intranet page and be able to find HR documentation, what activities are happening. And that took a lot of work. Like we had to like sit down and map all the different ways that people could go to different pages. We would watch someone that has never used it before and be like, hey, can you find like the town hall notes? Logically, where would you go? And just follow them as they move across. Yep. We had special interest groups. So when people had an interest, we would make a SIG, a special interest group around that focus. So it would be, and we had tons of them. We had one on anime, different types of dance groups. We had multiple bands that were kind of coming out of it. We had a basketball group that did a tournament, and the proceeds went to the School of the Blind. And then we got other companies to also compete. And then we did like a sixth fair, like where they would, it's almost like a school, right? Like where you'd hand out flyers saying like, join my club, right? And then as a company, we try to have a philanthropy, a social, and a professional development thing happening every month. So if that was picking up trash, if that was volunteering at an orphanage, if that was having a guest speaker, or doing like a social activity where we'd go to a lake together, like there was something happening consistently.
Why did you decide that sort of culture versus, let's say, you might imagine, Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, where it's just like, we're going to work harder than everyone else, and it is a little bit of a meat grinder, but also you have an opportunity to push yourself harder and do better things than you've ever done before?
I think I have a different ambition than they do, and I think that
what is your ambition?
This is my life, and I'm sharing my life with the other people around me. I want to enjoy it, and I do believe that there's ways to do business the right way. And that line is different for everybody. And I think that there's ways that Support Ninja probably could have been bigger than what it was, but because of how we did things, there's also benefits, right? Like our churn was really low. Customers stayed longer. Our lifetime value was higher. We could spend more on marketing because we didn't have to constantly backfill different roles that we had. So yeah, I think that, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, I mean, if you have managed 100 or 1,000 people, imagine like they're overseeing 400,000 to 800,000. Like it's a very wide range of they're one of the biggest employers. I can't imagine keeping track of that many people. I can't imagine like being responsible for that many people.
100%.
Yeah.
What do you think about, we haven't really talked about products all that much. Do you have any theses around product building and how to do that the right way at different stages? What does it look like? How do you track success for those elements?
Yeah. So I think that this has changed a lot recently. So in some ways, it's just being done faster and easier. So we made a product called Market Monster last week. And what we did was we had essentially we pulled from CRM data. And as you move your deals through the pipeline, it creates lookalike audiences. It reaches out to those lookalike audiences. You assign value to them as they move through. You create more lookalike audiences, right? It's like this self-feeding machine. You're feeding the monster, right? And like it was very easy to make a prototype. And then from there, it was talking to people. And I love that. I love doing sales with nothing to sell. That is like, some people hate it. I think it's the best thing in the world. I'm working on something new. I love talking to other founders about it. You can tell who's leaning in and who's not. You move them over to like an interest list and you give them updates every couple of weeks. Like that's a very fantastic way to build a product and watch it go live. And so, yeah, from there, you're just rolling out features. I like pairing software with services. So ideally you have a service that's on the back end of it.
Yeah, no, I think which is different than a lot of people. Obviously, you and I are in the same mindset on that front. Services are sexy. They're not something to be scared of. How do you though make sure you keep projects on track? And I ask this actually as a personal question because I feel like I've not done a great job myself as sort of CEO and leader of making sure our projects get on track. And maybe you say like, hey, it has to be EOS or something, but like making sure our products are delivered on time. We're getting better at it, but on time, on budget, and achieve the outcomes that we expect, which is like a high level of delight.
I think you can only do so many things at one time. So I would probably ask are you working on too many things? Is it narrow enough? Is your scope and your focus there on the things that you actually want to change? If you're like, Connor, I'm working on like these 20 different things and I'm not seeing change, and I'll be like, what about 3? What about 4?
100%.
And then being okay, letting a ball go by, like you don't have to swing at every pitch. So I think that's huge. And then understanding who's accountable for it. Is it you? Is it someone else on your team? Usually it's pretty glaring. I mean, if you're not on track for something, do you have lead indicators that are green, that are looking good going into that lag indicator? Lead indicator being like smaller numbers that lead to that big number, right?
So I have to remind myself when we're trying to build things out and just also scope it properly, I would say up front, and set really clear guidelines at the beginning to make sure people know what they have to report as they're ongoing to sort of hit the next step or next level or unlock. How do you think through kind of work-life balance, work-life unity? What does that mean, especially as you care more about like, hey, doing in-person things? But at the same time, you're running 6 companies. So how do we square those two things, if at all?
Yeah, for sure. I kind of view it as phases, right? Like I gave my 20s to, I'm going to build the biggest thing that I could. And my 30s is I want to explore my curiosity. I want to do big things and find what I enjoy. And then I think my 40s, I want to do hyper local things. If it's not like inside a 40-mile radius, it doesn't exist in my world. And so like I kind of gave myself permission to be like, that's how I'm going to spend these decades of my life. And then work-life balance. Each of the companies has a CEO. So I'm not the CEO of any of them. Right. And so I like that element where it's, I think I would be running down the street like as fast as I could if there's like someone chasing me with the CEO job. Mm-hmm. And so that helps with my life balance. And we're expecting a little one in October. So
congratulations.
I'm looking at like, here's my priorities and here's how I'm spending time. And here's how I actually want to structure my week is I want to take Fridays off and I want to be done at 3 every day, So like, it's just kind of structuring it that way.
So it's just structuring it that way, making sure that, of course, you have good CEOs for those companies. And then what are you doing? Check-ins with them once a week? Are they sending you an update once a week on key high-level things? And are you giving them metrics to hit? Sort of saying like
I mean, that's where I am going to point to EOS, right? Because that's why I'm doing it I want to have the record of the level 10 meeting. Like I want to see that the leadership team met and here's what they talked about. I want to see the quarterly and see, all right, and also the annual planning. Like we fly everyone over here and then we do our annuals, right?
And we say everyone, you mean all the CEOs or
and the leadership teams.
And the leadership teams.
Right. And so we talk about like what's working well, what's not working well, what's our goal for the next year. But that's the framework that gives me peace of mind, or else I'm always going to be like, I'm not doing enough, or I need to work harder. Right. Is that if there's no framework in place, then your boundaries are going to be encroached upon, and then your life balance is going to be off.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that I think I'm getting better and better at as I've gotten older, but I still have a ways to go to make it great. When you think through like advice that, well, actually, sorry, before I ask this question, I'm kind of curious, like why in your 20s was like, I'm going to go build this massive company and just make it financially big and successful. 30s is kind of managing all of these companies, and like the 40s, you think it's going to be hyper local. Like why that decision? It's just sort of an interesting choice.
Yeah, I don't know where this came from, but I've had this with me as far as like my mindset for the past 5 or 6 years. Is that in my 20s, I don't feel like, I worked my ass off. I was like sleeping on the floor of the office when we didn't have money to pay for it, right? Like it's not like a comfortable life. And my wife was in residency, so she was also working like 120-hour weeks. And I love that phase of my life, but it wasn't the right thing like moving forward. And then after you sell that company, you have a question of identity. Like who am I if I'm not this person for this company? And so that kind of lends itself to curiosity and kind of setting the tone of what are the things that you want to be working on or doing for the rest of your life. And then for 40s, I'm thinking more about where do I get the most energy? Where do I want to have my focus? And how many Zoom calls am I doing, right? Like if I'm doing like 10 or 12 Zoom calls a day, that's not it. If I'm meeting with people for coffee and doing ruck/walk on Saturday, doing poker games on Tuesday, like I like that stuff, right?
Yeah,
And
it's a good life, and it means you organize things in a really good way if you're able to have those outcomes.
Yeah, for sure. And if it works, great. If not, then I'll change my model.
Is there any advice? Or two last questions. They're different though. One is there any advice you would just sort of give an early entrepreneur, someone starting out, or to yourself? Like imagine yourself when you were starting in college, and is there advice you would have given yourself then?
Yeah, you don't have to have a new idea. You don't have to raise money. Just because something is manual or labor intensive doesn't mean it's not cool. I think that's huge. And you don't know what you don't know. Have an open mind. And when you're young, it's a fantastic time to start a company. You don't have a lot of overhead, and people are usually willing to help you.
Yep, so true. Related to that question, if there is a single piece of advice that you would give to every entrepreneur to achieve excellence, what would that be?
I think just focusing on 1%. Like, what's your goal? 1% better, right? Like that's something that you can wrap your head around.
Just every day, every week, every month, every year.
Yeah. 1%. And I think that like the people who really stand out, like, do you ever see videos of like the 85-year-old woman that broke the high jump record? I think she did that last week. Like, how remarkable is that? Is that like, that's worldwide news. Why? Because she was 1% better. And most adults I know have never ran full out in the past 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, if you're focusing on being 1% better on anything in your life, a lot of people just stop. And if you don't stop, then you're going to be ahead of most people.
It also that it reminds me a lot of obviously Warren Buffett's been in the news lately since he is saying he's retiring. People forget that the majority of his fortune has been made in the last like 10 years or something, 20 years. And that's basically because he didn't stop, right? He kept getting better and better and kept compounding day after day after day. And it's just a lot of patience to get there. But I mean, I generally feel, and presumably you do too, I'm a better entrepreneur, hopefully a better dad, hopefully a better person than I was when I was in my 20s because I've let those things compound. And of course, I still have that curiosity, like, God, please, like, shoot me if I'm 70, 80 years old and I'm bored because I don't know what else to do with myself. Like, I want to keep learning every day and keep compounding. And I hope I'm that 85-year-old person doing high jumps or the business equivalent or whatever it is at the level I enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm on board. Let's do it. High jumps.
Great. We are in this together, Connor. How can people get in touch if they want to learn more about all of your companies, your businesses, go on rucks with you? where can folks find you?
Yeah, we have the Entrepreneur Cooperative. So we meet on a regular basis. We hosted over 80 different events last year. We're on track to do over 100 this year. We have the Made It podcast that releases an episode every other week. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Connor Tomkies.
Amazing. Connor, really appreciate your time. It is precious. And I know you have a lot going on. So thank you for joining today.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it.